Hey, I'm Mark. What? You know what? You're just not intelligent. No, I'm just speaking the truth. In love. Speaking the truth. Anyway, let's go. Sit down, close the door. I don't want my boss to know what's going on in here. Why? I'm a history teacher, and I'm going rogue. So, if you want some insight into a society's collective thinking during a time period, check out the art. Art can give you an idea of the spirit of the age, what the Germans call the Zeitgeist. It's true of the painting of the Renaissance and the Cold War movies of the 60s. Let's look at two of those today. Let's see how Columbia Pictures responded to the Cold War, specifically the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Let's see what happened when movies went nuclear. Let's go rogue. Casey, you gotta give the fans what they want. Okay, I promise you this will be the last nuclear war video for a while.
It better be!
In 1959, Fidel Castro led a revolution in Cuba that overthrew the American-backed dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista and established a communist government 90 miles off of Florida. Now, New Yorkers couldn't access the bars, the casinos, the humidors, or the brothels of Havana. They demanded that the government do something so that they could access the bars, the casinos, the humidors, and the brothels. So the CIA proposed an invasion of Cuba by Cuban exiles at the Bay of Pigs. When John F. Kennedy became president in 1961, the CIA floated the idea by the new president, and he gave it his thumbs up. The invasion failed. Fidel Castro, now worried, rightfully, that his country would be the target of repeated invasions from the United States, and looked for someone to help deter the Yankee imperialist dogs. He found someone with similar interests in the Soviet Union. Since the early 1950s, the USSR was living under the threat of American medium-range nuclear missiles in Turkey. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev believed that Cuba could be a place to counter the American threat. In 1962, the Soviets began moving medium-range nuclear missiles into Cuba, establishing launch sites throughout the island. When American overflights over Cuba discovered the sites, the Soviets first denied their existence, then confirmed their presence, adding, "What are you going to do about them?" The two sides stood eyeball to eyeball, waiting for the other guy to blink. Kennedy announced a quarantine of the island, ringing the island with ships prepared to stop Soviet ships from reaching Cuba. The world's collective sphincters puckered as the Soviet ships approached the U.S. quarantine line. Would the U.S. Navy use force to stop the Soviet ships? Would the Soviets try to shoot their way through the U.S. naval blockade? Would naval action around Cuba lead to an exchange of nuclear missiles between America and Russia? Kennedy thought so. He went on TV and told American citizens as much. Now, how would you respond if your president gives you specific instructions on what to do if nuclear missiles strike your city? Duck and cover, duck and cover. Then the ships turned back. The Soviets didn't try to cross the quarantine line. The Soviets agreed to pull their missiles from Cuba, with an American promise not to invade Cuba. The U.S. also, quietly, agreed to pull their missiles from Turkey. We had averted a nuclear holocaust. But what if we didn't? What would happen to the world if some small event started a spiral that couldn't be stopped? What if some protocol or some unthinking computer simply spit out decisions without thought or moral clarity that could lead to mutually assured destruction? That was the focus of two movies released by Columbia Pictures in 1964 to audiences all geeked up about nuclear war. Failsafe was released in October of 1964, exactly 2 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis. Based on a book of the same name written by Eugene Burdick and Harvey Wheeler, the title refers to a geographic line that once crossed by American bombers, they cannot be recalled. In the movie, a computer error scrambles a squadron of bombers to attack Moscow. When the error is discovered, an order to call off the attack is sent to the airplanes. But one squadron can't receive the message because of Soviet radar jamming. "You're jamming me. Yeah, you can keep me buried in a corner." Hey, that's Tom Petty. Walter Matthau plays a very unfunny role as an advisor to the Defense Department. He's the film's devil's advocate, arguing that, well, it started, so let's finish it. Nuclear war can be won, and if it can be won, it should be won by the United States. America! The squadron continues on its run to Moscow. Much of the film is centered around the decisions made by the United States president, played by juror number 8. Oh, that's Henry Fonda. Yeah, the great American everyman, and his conversations with the Soviet premier through his interpreter, played by a young J.R. Ewing. While all the conversation is going on, the squadron continues its bombing run, rejecting orders to return, having already crossed the failsafe line. The Joint Chiefs of Staff first try to find a way to destroy the aircraft, sending a squadron of American fighters to shoot them down. Those run out of fuel over the Arctic. Once over Soviet airspace, the president orders the Air Force to tell the Soviets how they can bring the planes down. They knock out all but one. One final attempt to recall the last bomber, the pilot's wife is put on the radio, prompting him to not finish the attack. But the pilot's training is so complete that even his wife cannot stop him. As hope for recalling the plane fades, President Fonda makes the decision that he hopes will avert an all-out Soviet attack on the United States. He offers to drop a nuke on New York City if the bomber succeeds in bombing Moscow. Well, Moscow gets bombed, and Fonda follows through with his promise. The movie ends with a montage of people in New York going about their everyday lives before the nuclear bomb goes off. Roll credits. Before the release of Failsafe, though, in January 1964, Columbia released the movie Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying and Learned to Love the Bomb. This movie is loosely based, very loosely based, upon a 1958 novel called Red Alert by Peter George. In this case, the commander of an American Air Force base in Europe goes insane and orders a first strike against the Soviet Union. He sends his bombers, then seals off the base and cannot be contacted. The president, Merkin Muffley, convenes his Joint Chiefs of Staff and tries to find a way to recall the bombers before they reach the failsafe line. The bombers are recalled, except for one that was believed to be shot down. It reaches its target and drops its bomb, starting a nuclear war, which we assume destroys all life on Earth. Roll credits. So the plots of Failsafe and Dr. Strangelove are similar. Nuclear-armed bombers are mistakenly sent to attack the Soviet Union and cannot be recalled when the mistake is found. But the films diverge in terms of tone. Dr. Strangelove was produced by Stanley Kubrick, one of a long list of iconic movies that he produced. Ugh. Would you guys stop it with little shining twins? Anyway, Kubrick changed some of the dialogue from Red Alert and turned the movie into a dark comedy, a satire of how we approach nuclear war, and the many ways in which a spiral towards war can be triggered. In this case, an American Air Force base commander, General Jack D. Ripper, played by Sterling Hayden, launches his bombers in response to the worldwide communist plot to sap and purify our precious bodily fluids. You know, the policy of fluoridating water was started in the 1950s and was seen by some as a communist plot to do just that. The pilot of the runaway B-52, not the Love Shack people, we won't be able to talk about the U-2 incident either, was Texas-born, Texas-bred Major T.J. King Kong. The role was first offered to John Wayne, but he was busy with another project. It was then offered to Dan Blocker of Bonanza, who turned it down because he thought it was too pinko. The role was taken by Slim Pickens, a veteran of Western movies. When the go command is given, Kong goes through a survival kit contents check with his crew, which includes 1 combination Russian-English dictionary and Bible, 3 lipsticks, 3 pairs of nylon stockings. Well, after reading the list of rations, Kong announces, "Shoot, fella could have a pretty good weekend in Vegas with all that stuff." In the original script, the line was "a good time in Big D being Dallas. But that was changed at the last minute because of the Kennedy assassination in Dallas just 3 months earlier. George C. Scott, who won an Academy Award for his portrayal of Patton, plays General Buck Turgidson, the most outspoken of the president's advisors in the war room. Scott believed that this was a dramatic film like Failsafe. On the first few days of filming, Kubrick asked Scott to overact as much as he could on the first practice shot and then do the second shot straight. It was too late when Scott realized that Kubrick was keeping all the first overacted shots for the final product. He never worked with Kubrick again. Nevertheless, he finished the film overacting as Kubrick directed him. In one scene, he gets into a fight with the Russian ambassador and the president intervenes, uttering my favorite line in all of movie history. "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room." More on that in a moment. Top bill in the film, though, went to Peter Sellers before his days as Inspector Clouseau. The good one. The movie also stars Peter Sellers and Peter Sellers. Sellers plays a trifecta of roles. The first is Wing Commander Lionel Mandrake, Second Command to General Ripper. In the war room, he plays United States President Merkin Muffley. Lastly, he plays the title character, Dr. Strangelove, who actually only appears for the last about 30 minutes of the film. He is the lead physicist for the American nuclear program, a former Nazi that is now confined to a wheelchair and whose arm spasmodically rises to a Nazi salute. And he twice refers to President Muffley as Mein Führer. But in the most iconic scene of the movie, the nuke that is to be dropped gets stuck in the bomb bay of Major Kong's B-52. Kong goes down to fix it. And while sitting on the bomb bay door is open and the bomb falls towards its target, with Major Kong straddling it, waving his cowboy hat and whooping like a cowboy that he is. "Gonna take my nuke to the old town road." Well, the explosion triggers the Soviet doomsday device, and the film ends with stock footage of many of the nuclear test explosions throughout the 1950s, supposedly bringing an end to the world. The original film had a pie fight in the war room as the bombs went off. Not sure why that was cut. So the public's fear of mutually assured destruction by a simple mistake was highlighted by Hollywood in 1964 to be consumed by Americans living in fear of nuclear holocaust. Failsafe was well received by critics, but underperformed at the box office, seen as a dramatic knockoff of Dr. Strangelove. It was remade for television in 2000 and is still critically acclaimed 50 plus years later. For its part, Dr. Strangelove is considered by the American Film Institute to be the third, that's number 3, greatest comedy in the history of American cinema. This plotline, a protocol or technical glitch over which people have no control, beginning a countdown of events, driving us headlong in a nuclear war, will become popular again in the 1980s. Think Matthew Broderick in War Games or Skynet in the Terminator series. All playing on our very real fears of nuclear war. Fears that, good or bad, have subsided in this generation. But it was a real fear for those of us that lived through the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. Hey, thanks for stopping by. I hope you learned something or got a laugh, or preferably both. Comment and like if you did. I would love it if you would subscribe to my little channel. We talk history through pop culture, sports, weirdness. I want to thank my producer, Casey Moulton, for sitting through another Cold War video. Also want to thank Avery for doing the teleprompter, and thank Mr. Brent Allen for letting us use his studio here on the campus of Columbia High School. I had fun, but I don't quit my day job. Come by anytime. Just remember to keep that door closed. Oh, and get under your desk if the bomb goes off nearby. Remember, I'm Mark Haggard. I'm a history teacher, and I hope to go rogue with you again real soon. Survival kit contents check. In them you will find 1 .45 caliber automatic, 2 boxes of ammunition, 4 days concentrated emergency rations, 1 drug issue containing antibiotics, morphine, vitamin pills, pep pills, sleeping pills, tranquilizer pills, 1 miniature combination Russian phrase book and Bible, $100 in rubles, $100 in gold, 9 packs of chewing gum, 1 issue of prophylactics, 3 lipstick, 3 pair of nylon stockings. Shoot, fella could have a good time in Vegas with all that stuff.